All right. Looks like it's 1:15. Um, so we are going to get started. This is discussing the 2021 draft RIPA report. We are going to need to shorten this section of the report and finish up at 1:40 to allow time for public comment. So we've got just about 25 minutes. So with that, let me open it up to the board for discussion of the report. And remember, and I need to do this too, but please mention your name when you're making a comment so that the closed captioning will reflect who's speaking. I actually, well, while I still have everyone's attention, I have a comment. This is Sahar Durali. So in footnote 8, I don't have the page number because I have it printed out, of the section on primary reason for stop. There's a section that discusses 4.9% of stops initiated for reasonable suspicion were due to community caretaking functions. I'm assuming that was written out in the narrative responses of the officers, but then there's a mention of homelessness and folks with mental health conditions in that footnote. And I'm actually wondering, and this is maybe a little bit outside the scope, definitely outside the scope of this report, but as I understand, we might be doing some cleanup and additions to the stop data regulations. And unfortunately, in California, unhoused individuals are becoming a demographic of their own. Just in LA, we have 66,000 plus homeless individuals. And so I'm wondering, I think it would be really great to have data on that, because I definitely don't think that every encounter with a homeless or an unhoused individual is just community caretaking. There's tons of encampment sweeps and other sorts of policing of those areas. So I'm wondering if we can draw that out in the data in the future, and if that came up at all in the data that was reported.
Sahar, I can't speak to the data that was reported, but I can speak to the future for the regulations, and that certainly is something that we can address.
Okay, I think that would be really helpful.
So I had just a few little questions, comments. Well, I thought the report was great. I really appreciate you. Comments and suggestions on things, making things different, and the information now we have all this information. It's really striking, some of this data, even more so than before. One thing that really was super striking to me was the average number of actions taken by officer. Oh no, sorry. There was no reportable actions taken on most of the stops conducted, and I think that number, I can't remember the exact number now, or I can't see where it was because that was the number of stops. The number of actions. But I wonder if there's any way, though, to confirm the number of, as part of the audit process, confirming whether or not the data that we're getting on how few actions are being taken in a given stop is actually borne out by what's actually going on the ground. Like, my biggest concern, is it's kind of been repeatedly, is that officers are not actually recounting all the things that are happening on a given stop. And so I don't know if there's any random audit or random anything that can be done looking at some of the data, whether it's looking at the other agency data where they may have had to recount what's going on, or body cam data, auditing that and some, like a sample of that, see how that compares to stop data from different officers to see if, generally speaking, the RIPA reported data is actually what's happening on the ground. And for instance, also like the lethal uses of force, I wonder if those reports have been, I assume that that's so documented in so many different ways, but if making sure that those things are at least validated in other data that I know the DOJ receives, to make sure that that's actually at least accurate, making sure that the stop data is being reflected in, or the stop data is reflecting what's actually happening. So that's, if there's any way to know, even if we just know that that's, if we can identify whether or not it's a trend towards underreporting or a trend towards actually it's accurately reporting it, that would be fantastic to know whether how we should take that information in terms of how many actions are being taken as a result of a stop. One super small thing that would be, I think, useful to have when it's talking about the actions taken after a stop. I think this is on page 16 of the version that I am looking at. It mentions the searching, the highest number of actions that are being taken, search, cuffs, removal, but I think it's worth including just how many were the percent that was cited, arrest, given a warning in that section, so that we know, even though it's a teeny fraction, I think it's important to know, like, the vast majority of stops do not end in arrest. It's only this particular number, or this particular number of even a citation. So I think that's valuable to just have laid out there, because I think, yeah, that's enough for that. And then one other follow-up question, which I think goes to also Sahar's mention of trying to clean up some of the stuff through legislation. I know that one thing that was raised before was issues around agencies or officers including personal identifying data in their RIPA data collection, and I don't know if anything has been done further on that issue, or if there's anything that we can support the DOJ doing on that issue that might be useful.
Kevin or Trent, are you able to respond to the data categories? The questions, rather, not categories.
Yeah, can you hear me? I have headphones now. Hopefully that'll resolve some of my audio issues that I was having earlier. I apologize for that. I was unaware.
You hear much.
Check my phone. And now I have a bunch of tests. So there was a question about, just for reference, I believe Melanie, you were talking about the appendix table A4 on page 7 of the appendix. Is that what you're talking about when you're talking about average actions taken?
No, sorry, I meant to refer to in the body where it mentions that actions were taken by an officer during a stop on 19% of stops. And so just kind of trying to see if there's any way to externally validate that.
Right. Yeah, I know that there are some agencies that have begun to do those sorts of spot checks. I believe that there's a report out from that was using 2018 RIPA data, but there's a report out that they put out in the LA Office of Inspector General, where they went and took a sample of RIPA data and then went and pulled body cam footage for those reported incidents and encounters, and then compared the data that was entered in the stop data collection form to what they're able to view on the body cam footage. And so maybe I can find that report and send it out and put it in the chat potentially as a source for that type of analysis, because I know that there are at least an agency that's already involved in doing that, and perhaps the board could kind of prop that type of work up, because I agree that that's something that would be very beneficial for us all to know. That information is oftentimes stored.
Dr. Davis, I'll touch just briefly today on testing and the hospital demand model, and we'll turn it over for questions. So first, for testing, in anticipation of this upcoming holiday weekend, there will be a handful of the LA County operators.
I think somebody is not muted. Okay, I think, yeah, good. All right, that's gone. All right, I think, Kevin, I interrupted you.
Oh, no. So to that end, we can track down that report and send it out for people to review as something that maybe the report wants to consider encouraging agencies to partake in. There are a couple other questions in there. Arrest footnote. Oh yeah, the footnote. Oh no, that was a question for me. Oh yeah, we can mention. Sorry, to your point about when we talk about handcuffings and the actions taken during stop, having a short reference that would kind of frame that in the umbrella of looking at what percentage of individuals were arrested. So perhaps, because oftentimes you think of handcuffing in the context of an arrest, but that's not the only context under which individuals are handcuffed. And so we can add in some language there that kind of compares between the two, that would look at the handcuffing incidents during actions taken during stop, and then also looking at the results of the stop for those cases as well. So that's something that we could incorporate fairly easily in the version of the draft. So I'll take a note here so we can add that in as well. Am I missing other questions that, Nancy, you thought I could respond to? I know that there were a number.
I think that was everything. Sahar, Sahar also had a question about data. Did that address what your question?
Yeah, I guess my question was, in that footnote that I had mentioned, footnote 8, there was a reference to community caretaking activities. Can you expound on what that means and how you?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I missed that. Yes, you're right.
No problem.
Yeah. I believe initially you made a comment about. I imagine that is collected in the narrative fields. That's not where that information is coming from. When officers indicate that the reason why they initiated contact with someone with reasonable suspicion that they're involved in a criminal activity, they have to then provide like a code for what offense type they suspected the person of committing. And because there's no way for officers in the regulations to kind of indicate that the reason why they were initially making contact with the person wasn't for an offense at all, but rather for a community caretaking purpose, there's a code that's in the stop data collection system that officers can use to indicate that they initiated contact with the person for a community caretaking purpose, not a suspected crime. And so where we're getting that percentage is from, we look for that code in there, and then we carve that out that way. And so it's not from the narrative.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was pretty.
Is that defined? Am I just blanking? Is that defined in the regulations somewhere? I might be blanking.
No. So that was put in the system because it's not defined in the regulations, and law enforcement agencies flagged that once they began collecting data, as we don't have a reason for stop that actually captures the actual reason why we're initiating these encounters with someone. And so the department put that code in so that they can indicate it in one way. But we can't add that in there without a regulation change.
And this
otherwise.
Is something that we're looking at closely of fixing the regulations, because I think there may have been confusion. And I don't know if everyone remembers, but in the first draft of the regulations, there was a section about reason for presence on the scene, and then when that got consolidated into just reason for stop, and we didn't have like an explanatory reason why the officer was there, I think that may have gotten lost in the mix. So I think we need to really clarify that and look at that, because right now the question asks what was the basis for the stop, and community caretaking isn't a basis for a stop, because a stop is defined as a detention or a search. So we need to come up with a better fix for that, is the short answer. But for now, the research center is dealing with the data in the way that we have it, in the best way that they can, and trying to parse those pieces out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I understand. I think definitely for that particular category, community caretaking, maybe we can come up with a definition, because especially in the context of unhoused folks, I think a sweep or something like that might be categorized as a community caretaking function, but is perceived as sort of a stop or a search, or is a stop and a search. So thanks for that clarification, and I look forward to being able to flesh that out more.
Yeah, and I just also double checked, and I didn't want to say that my memory was correct, and that I didn't share with anybody. But RIPA had a whole, there's a section in the penal code that talks about dealing with home housing status. So there is a piece in the penal code. It didn't get translated into the government code section, but it is an area that the legislature had identified that the board could evaluate for purposes of working and looking at those areas.
Okay, that's great.
Can I get in the queue for? I think there's people before me.
Hi, LaWanda Hawkins, board member. And can you please explain again what is considered legal force? And what's the policy behind when they say legal force? And this issue about people giving permission to be searched.
Maybe I was mishearing. Were you saying legal or lethal?
Legal.
Is this a question for the research center then? In our section, we don't make mention of legal force. We
Sorry, lethal. I'm sorry, lethal. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right. Okay. Yes. So lethal force is a force category, and the NIJ force continuum that we adopted for that form of analysis. And so what we've categorized as lethal force in the RIPA data are instances in which officers discharge their firearm. And so that's what's categorized as lethal force in that section of the report. And there's let me see if I can find the specific the table where we break that down. In the version of the report that I'm looking at, there on page 33, there's a table there that goes over each of the 3 force types that we use to categorize the RIPA action taken during stop values into. And you can see there that under lethal, we have firearm, discharged or used listed. And so I believe your second question had to do with consent to search. Is that?
Yes. And where are you getting that data from? Is law enforcement telling you they gave consent?
Yeah. So in the regulations, there are 2 places where the issue of consent to search comes into place. One is under the actions taken by officer during a stop. There's a place where officers can indicate that they asked the stopped individual if they could perform a search. And then if they indicate that they asked the individual, then the officer has to indicate whether or not the individual consented to that search. So they can put ask for consent and then consent received, yes or no. And so that's captured in one place in the data there. And then there's also under the basis for search categories in the data, there is a place where officers can indicate one of the bases or the basis for their search was that the person consented to a search. And so it's captured in 2 places in the data, which gives us a few different ways that we can analyze that sort of data. And that is something that I didn't get to because we're running out of time there at the end in this issue of consent to searches is one of the things that's still on our plate that we're working on moving forward, and that we hope to have some more fleshed out content on at a future in a future revision of the report. And so that's one of the things that we're still in the process of examining.
Thank you, Kevin. You did an awesome job just going through. This is very detailed.
Oh, we're happy that you're happy.
I think board member Raphael had a question or a comment.
Oh, thank you, Sahar. Steve Raphael here. I thought the results with the mental health status were quite strong, and I had maybe one suggestion for a way to present it, and maybe even just to put a pin on this might be something that we explore in the future, and that might be to think about doing a tab of the search and discovery rate analysis, by those 3 mental health categories, ignoring race or whatever, and then looking within racial groups, and making that mental health designation or that category and those relative difference just a focus of analysis in one table. That might be a worthwhile thing to do. And then I imagine at some point, there are ways that we could triage that to look at other things. But I thought that was an excellent addition to this report.
I'll take it. So to summarize, my understanding is that you think that it would be beneficial to repeat those types of analyses, but not while taking out the race element of it and just looking at the mental health condition.
Or are they the same way that we might look at a disparity by race? We can focus on a disparity by mental health status. And the intersection.
Okay.
One more comment, Kevin. Regarding the Highway Patrol and their data, is there any way that can be broken out? Because what happens with the Highway Patrol in Northern California may not be happening with the Highway Patrol in LA County. Just
okay, yeah. I thought
it could be a little different.
Right, yeah. Some states handle their state patrols data collection a bit different than how my understanding of how we collect it here in California is, where they actually collect, like say for instance, in Connecticut, I know in their reports for their equivalent to the RIP report, they actually break out their state patrols by the region that they serve, and they analyze them as separate agencies, although they serve under the same umbrella agency. So I'll have to talk with the business team, IT, to see. I can think of some ways that we may be able to do that, but it really depends on some of the ways that the agencies submit the data and whether or not they're submitting under ORIs in different areas, which are like basically numeric identifiers of agencies. So we can explore the possibility that we could break out CHP's data into various regions. We could come back and talk to board members about specifically maybe how many different regions they want to break out CHP's data into, if there's interest there. But I'll have to explore with Client Services Program whether or not we have the capability to break out their data that way.
We have time for one or two comments before we go to public comment.
Sahar, this is David Swing. Can I offer some thoughts?
Go for it.
I have a couple of questions related to the data and just interested in learning more. Like Dr. Raphael, very interested in seeing more on the mental health. That is a significant component of the work that we're doing in law enforcement. For those who were searched, I'm curious to know if that takes into account those who are placed on some sort of a psychiatric hold, a 5150, because that's for officer safety reasons. Individuals who are placed on a hold will be searched, and that will influence the perception of those who are searched because of mental health conditions. So I think if we can break that out, that will help inform the data. Since we're using the ACS to provide context for our data, one of the things we're not collecting is if the person who was stopped is a resident of that community and serving a community today that has a mall and a significant employment base. That will help, I think, in our leadership as executives to understand our stop data as it relates to members of our community and the demographic makeup of those stops as opposed to those who are not. So I just advocate that the board consider adding that to the stop data survey as a way to try and identify if that person was or was not a member of that officer or deputy's community. And then related to probation and parole, we've had some good conversations around probation and parole and the type of stop, if it's discretionary, non-discretionary. I would suggest that because there is some disagreement there about where it lies, between discretionary and non-discretionary, what would the data look like if we just removed that from that table entirely to determine whether it was a discretionary or non-discretionary search? Because I think that I would just be curious to see what the data looks like if we remove that. And then finally, around the topic of use of force, there was a meeting we were at in Oakland, I think in February of 2019, maybe sometime pre-COVID, because we were all together. And at that meeting, one of the recommendations from the law enforcement agency was to be able to identify subject actions prior to the use of force. So I just want to have that conversation with the board at some point to update our survey instrument, to have an opportunity to identify subject actions or perceived subject actions, or however we want to do it prior to the use of force, whether it was lethal force or less lethal force or any other type of force used by an officer or deputy. So I just submit those suggestions and questions. Look forward to see how we can incorporate some of those into our future report.
Okay, we're at 1:40, so I think unless there's any other really quick comments, we should transition to public comment to give the public an opportunity to discuss the report.
Sahar,
Yes.
Lily's been trying to talk.
Oh.
I wonder if her computer volume is down because we can't hear her. She was muted, then she's unmuted, but we can't hear her voice.
Okay.
I don't know how to get that question to her. You see her?
No. Oh, right. Okay. Yes. No. Is she? Are you able to type in the question, Lily, or the comment? We can't hear you, unfortunately.
Ask her if her computer volume is down. I don't know if she can hear.
She probably, did you hear? Is your computer volume down? I think. Okay. Right, she checked volume, unfortunately. Is there a way to call into the meeting? With a dial in? Can someone put the dial in the, okay, she's typing her question or comment.
While Lily's typing in her comment, I just want to also remind everyone that these discussions can be further developed during the upcoming subcommittee meeting.
Oh, that she wants to know, I think that we should be connecting the data trends to policy recommendations. Is that right? Okay. Right. Thank you for that comment. Hopefully that can be, oh, it's not done. Here is an example Chief Swing mentioned. And the Connecticut's study of consent searches in Hamden, eliminating those. Oh, the study of consent searches in Hamden helped greatly reduce disparities. Okay. So eliminate, right. They banned searches solely on consent, and that helped to reduce disparities, so that can be a policy recommendation that we make potentially. Am I understanding that correctly? CHP has done the same for a limited period. All right. Anything else part of that comment? Okay. She looks forward to future discussion. Okay. All right, so let's move on to public comments. And as Nancy mentioned, and we'll mention this at the end too, that subcommittee meetings are upcoming to flesh this out further. I'm going to hand it over to the DOJ.
Okay, we are ready for our next speaker.
Does anybody want to engage in public comment? If so, please raise your hand and you will be led into the meeting.
Karen Glover, you can speak now.
Hi, folks. Thank you again. So I had another epiphany about the work, and part of that is there needs to be a level of accountability for the departments themselves. What's really going on is individual law enforcement officer looking at their practices, and in any other institution, the person at the head of that institution, the institution itself would undergo some accountability processes. And there's no discussion of that here. And I think that is one of the areas that will really change things. A second point before I get cut off is I'm really, with all due respect, really disturbed by the comment earlier just now that you might look at whether someone who's being stopped is a member of the community, because that really opens up an issue of mobility, freedom of mobility wherever we want to go. It also invokes this classic notion in police studies of the out of place doctrine. And I think the ramifications of that point are serious. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Karen. Do we have another speaker?
Yes, Ava, you're up.
Great. Hi, this is Ava Bitran from the ACLU again. Thank you very much to the DOJ and to the board for the opportunity to make a comment. I mostly just wanted to echo board member Lily's call for recommendations. I know this is something that the board had discussed last year, and I think that this year and the next, given the lag for new agencies coming online, are a good time, especially also given the kind of broad public interest in reimagining public safety and the role of policing in the community. Might be nice to have that expertise. And I also wanted to thank the Department of Justice for making the report available online ahead of the meeting. I think it certainly made for a more productive conversation from the members of the public. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Ava. All right, Trent, do we have another speaker?
At this time, we have no one in the queue, but we can probably give it another minute or so if someone else would like to raise their hand if they have would like to speak.
Is there anyone else? Aisha?
No, I don't think we have anyone else. Trent?
We've got one more, Rachel McHale. I just accepted in, so she's got to accept the request to present. And once she does, she'll be able to speak. We'll give her a second. All right, Ms. McHale, you are up.
Oh, hi there. Yeah, I'm just interested in, you talked about best practices on how to recruit in the future. And I just wonder how you screen currently for either people who are already in service or those who you're looking to recruit for any potential links to white supremacy groups, or just generally kind of understanding unconscious bias. Obviously, the most obvious being through social media, looking at white supremacy and what they might follow, but also at a more subtle level, actually where that unconscious bias is coming from and how to really tackle that at a much deeper level than the kind of current level of training. As I understand it, is fairly minimum. Any thoughts on that? I'd really appreciate.
Right. Thank you so much, Rachel, for your comments. And we apologize, your time is up. However, feel free to submit more comments on our email at ab953doj.ca.gov.
No more public commenters, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much to the public for your comments. Again, this brings us to the last item of our RIPA board agenda, which is discussion of next steps. Subcommittee meetings will be commencing at the end of September and early October. Please be on the lookout for announcement of those. You can get all announcements at oag.ca.gov, where we really encourage members of the public to sign up for mailing lists. The next board meeting is going to be on November 5th. We will put out an agenda forthcoming. Again, you can access it through the same mediums. And we thank you all for your participation. And I think that's it. Am I missing anything, DOJ?
There is one more item, Sahar, and we forgot to do it earlier, so we are doing it now. The team has been working on an outreach flyer. This was something that Angela Sierra and Andrea Guerrero had done many years ago, and the team is working on updating it. And I think one of the team members would like to explain what that is. And it was provided in your material handout. So if you should have that PDF of what the flyer looks like. Aisha or Anna?
Yes, sure, I will. Board members, you have in your handouts a flyer, and as Nancy had mentioned, it's a takeoff on work that the board had done previously, but we want to increase the outreach. And so it's a, did you know that California has a Racial and Identity Profiling Act? It summarizes the act, what the role is of the board, and then how to stay informed. The fact that you have access to the data, the board does a report, and that you can subscribe to the website and learn more about the meetings. Oh, there's the flyer where you're able to share it with the public. So it's a nice way that the board, DOJ, our agency partners, and the community that is aware of the RIPA board can get the word out, because it's just imperative. The board does a tremendous amount of work, but it means so much more if we can get Californians up and down the state to be aware of the board meetings, the data, the subcommittee work, and the reports. So we wanted to share this with you to give you an idea of what we are considering making available to you and others. Any comments or thoughts, questions?
Where is the flyer going to be published?
It's going to be on the website. However, we have prepared an outreach organization community list. And I'm glad you brought that up, because we are, we would love to have organizations let us know about themselves, and the best way to do that is through our email, ab953doj.ca.gov, that we have already compiled about 500 organizations and government agencies, stakeholder, advocate organizations, and community groups to just start the process. But it's going to be a continuing work in progress. So that's our starting place. It's going to be uploaded on the website, but also emailed to as many groups that we get their organization email for.
And that's in addition to the listserv as well. But we would like the board to look at this. I don't know if you're ready today, but we would like you to approve the flyer, or if you would like to table that and have additional comments. But so either way, Sahar.
I'm pretty open. I think I'm not sure if everybody's had a chance to take a look at it. Maybe if we table it to next meeting, will that give you enough time to put it out?
I say put it out. I like it. I think it's very beautiful. It gives up the information. This is Sandra Brown, by the way. The only question I have is because of COVID again, it says attend or view subcommittee meetings. Will there be information placed on the flyer to invite more than the 119 we had today on these Blue Jean meetings? Will that information ever be out there for citizens?
Well, I think if this is Allison Elgar from DOJ, as part of it, if we're asking them to sign up for the mailing list, and we notice all of the meetings and send out the notice and agenda 10 days before each meeting to that mailing list. And so if folks subscribe to that mailing list, they'll get all the information about the subcommittee meeting.
Awesome.
This is LaWanda, board member. I love the flyer. I posted it on my Facebook page along with the agenda, and people really thought it was nice. It was very informative. So a lot of people didn't even know that they even had anything like this in the state of California.
So,
Steve, I love the flyer too. I think I would be happy voting to, or maybe I'll make a motion that we vote on putting.
This is Brendan Woods. One quick comment. The third section, the first bullet, eliminating racial and identity profiling in law enforcement requires everyone's participation. That's kind of the purpose of the flyer, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe we might want to put that in a different section so it's in the front and center, because we're trying to encourage participation as opposed to having kind of like you're burying the lead of the story. That's what you want up front and center. If we could maybe move that instead of a bullet there to have it higher up and kind of the call of the flyer. One suggestion.
Great.
To Steve's motion.
I'll second it. Sandra Brown.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we have to do a roll call for that?
Quickly, we can.
Okay, I'm ready. Sandra Brown.
Aye.
Sahar Durali.
Aye.
Felicia Espinosa.
Aye.
Nancy Pasco. Aye. LaWanda Hawkins.
Aye.
Lily Kajabi.
She had to step off the call.
Okay. Damon Kurtz. John McMahon.
He also had to step off the call.
Melanie Ochoa.
Yes.
Stephen Raphael.
Aye.
Angela Sierra.
Aye.
Warren Stanley.
Aye.
David Swing.
Aye.
Brendan Woods.
Aye.
Okay, that's affirmative. I counted 10 supporting that flyer, so it passes. Thank you.
And I just want to thank Aisha, Anna Rick, Kendall Micklethwaite, Dominique Alcaraz, and Allison Elgert for putting this flyer together. They have really been working behind the scenes to, beef up the outreach and get the word of the board out. And because this is such important work, and I am so very happy to have them on our team now. If you recall, there weren't a whole lot of us here, but now we have a really robust group, and they've been doing a fantastic job. So thank you, team, in doing that.
Thank you. One, I know we have like no time, but someone mentioned, Karen Glover mentioned that asked if the flyer would be in multiple languages. Can we address that really quickly? Are we going to get it translated?
This is definitely. Oh, go ahead, Anna.
I was going to, sorry, Nancy. You can go ahead and go.
Oh, sorry, Dominique. You probably know more than I do, but we're definitely doing Spanish.
Oh,
yes.
Anna
Our program at the DOJ has offered to translate the flyer into the most common languages in California. So that will have that done.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I think with that, is there anything else from the DOJ? Oh, okay. So we are hereby adjourning the September 2nd ROPA board meeting. Thank you all for participating, and we'll see you in a few months and at the subcommittee meetings.
Thank you, Sahar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.